may be the postseason, but there are records still to be broken this year. And tonight at Belvidere, junior Emma Pierson was 2 points away from breaking IBCA Hall of Famer and Nevada women's head basketball coach Amanda Levens' 686 single-season point record. But first, Pierson wouldn't have to worry about a conference foe in the regional semifinals as the Pretzels made their way over to Boone County to kick off our coverage this evening. Pierson wasting no time getting to that #1 spot on the record book as she buries the transition three to tie things up at 3-3 in the early going. Pierson now has the single season and single game point record coming for Levens' all-time points record as well. Pretzel staying in this one, though. Great drive from Aaliyah Martin as she finishes inside for a pair to retake the first quarter lead. Freeport continuing to find success attacking the rim as Jalea Young gets it going in the paint, but the Bucks would continue to torch the Pretzels in transition as Ariana LeBeau converts. Bucks come away with a dominant win. They're just 1 win away from their first regional title since 2003. Bucks play the winner of this one as the other half of the Mural City takes on top-seeded Sycamore in the other half of the Belvidere Regional Semifinals. Starting things out with the senior Cortland Hefty converting things from the wing to cut into Sycamore's lead. Spartans continuing to keep their double-digit lead, and this one is Lexi Carlson gets the runner to go as Sparty leads 41-14 in the third, and closing out their dominant win to open the postseason. Monroe McGee buries this one from distance. Bucks and Spartans go toe-to-toe on Friday at 6:30. To Class 4A now, the 4th seed in the Auburn Regional gets a little home cooking in their playoff opener. The Knights welcome in the 6th-seeded Jayhawks to Dolph Stanley Gym. Slow start offensively for both teams. Auburn's first field goal of the game comes 5 minutes in on this Destiny Robinson three-pointer, and it still gives Auburn a 1-point lead. Jefferson trying to work its height advantage now. This inside bucket by Cadence Bailey gives the Jayhawks an 8-7 lead, but that would be Jefferson's last lead of the game. The Knights start lighting up the scoreboard 3 points at a time. Here's to you, Miss Robinson. Destiny Robinson from beyond the arc. Once again, the sophomore starting to feel it. Another from Desti 3. Robinson there as Destiny puts up yet another. Then it starts to get contagious. Elizabeth Mueller from downtown Auburn uses a 12-0 run to seize control, and they win it by, you guessed it, 12.